Hi, welcome to Broken and Brilliant. I'm Carrie O'Toole with Carrie O'Toole Ministries, and today I'm joined by Monica Badgley, who is the founder of Radsibs.org. So welcome, Monica.
Hi, thanks, Carrie, for having me.
You bet. We go back a little ways, and Rad Sibs came about just a couple years ago, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about who you are, why did you get into this whole thing, and what is radsibs.org. So I'll let you just share however you want.
Sure. So my name is Monica, and let's see. Rad Sibs came about a couple years ago. I am a mom of 3 kids with Rad, and actually, and one without. But again, there's a lot of backstory to that, and but really, it just was born out of the Lord putting this ministry on my heart and me resisting for a while. And then with the encouragement of you, Carrie, and some of the lovely ladies at Rad Advocates, really just, and me reaching out for different resources and being told, hey, why don't you start this?
Yes, we need that resource.
Exactly.
Why don't you do it?
Right. And there was some resistance there for sure on my part for quite a while. And, but then I kind of released it and leaned into it. And the Lord has really blessed me and my family through it. And it appears to have, that he's blessed others through it as well.
Yeah. Can you share just a little bit about what the resistance was? What were the fears, and
oh boy,
what would make you not want to just dive right on in?
Well, that's a great question. So I'm sure some of our fellow rad moms out there, know what it's like to basically feel like you're living this secret life in your home that others just could not possibly fathom and understand.
Right.
So there's a lot of fear of judgment and fear. And maybe, I experienced, much like other families too, experienced a lot of that judgment from well-meaning friends and extended family members. And so it kind of makes you shrivel up a little bit more and kind of cocoon and just try to survive day to day in your own home. So the idea of stepping out and, putting my face or name or just coming clean really was quite frightening. And I felt much more comfortable looking to you all to do that and gleaning, wisdom from you all. And so, in fact, I actually really for the first year and a half, really, I did not I had my voice out there, but I did not have my name. I had no personal identifying information connected to the ministry because I was still dealing with that fear. Even when, I'm acknowledging this, encouraging others, I was still struggling with that myself.
Yeah. So what made it that you feel like you're okay putting your name and your face out there now?
It's a great question. I think healing, time and healing, but really having processed and worked through and just owning that this is what it is. And the idea of just reconciling that in my heart and my mind took a long time, but there's a lot of peace in that. And so I'm not to not be hiding and having those secrets. It's still, there's still scary moments or fear.
Your heart flutters here and there.
Yes. Fear of what will my, these friends of our family and extended family members think. It's still a concern, but it's gone to the wayside. And it's not the forefront concern that I had years back when I was still living in it.
And that absolutely is part of the healing. You can always tell when somebody's really healed up when, and it's not like you have to speak about it everywhere you go, but I remember for me, when I first started sharing my story, I went to a speaker training one time, and they said they just wanted each person to come up and share something for like 10 minutes. And it was the first time I had tried to share our story. And I snot cried through the whole thing. It was just, and it was the ugliest, most awful experience. And I just remember coming down going, okay, well, I guess I'm not quite ready for that yet. So another couple years went by, and then I was able to start talking about it a little bit more. And the more you talk about it, the more healing you get as well.
Very true.
So that's just amazing. Thanks for sharing that, Monica. I think so many can relate to just that fear, you know, because parents of kids with RAD, which is Reactive Attachment Disorder, for the most people who will watch this probably already know that, but RAD is an intimacy disorder that comes many times with kids who have early developmental trauma, childhood trauma. And so they come into their new home, their foster home, their adoptive home, sometimes even a biological home. If there's, you know, medical kinds of trauma or something like that, it can happen in lots of different ways. And our ministry deals with mainly the parents of these kids, because they come to us with their own grief and trauma from trying to parent a child who's got a whole boatload of trauma. And it's traumatic to parent a child with trauma.
Yes. And so that even that statement it can be, so we can have such denial about that as parents, at least early on. And we have to grieve that just to even get to the point where we can accept that is really difficult. Right. I know that the first time, throughout this process, my husband, myself, and our non-RAD daughter, we had these symptoms of PTSD, which I never would have said PTSD
from
for some background from parenting. Never that. And when we were actually diagnosed with that, even it just sounded so ridiculous, honestly, because well, for one, my husband and I met in Iraq. We've served overseas as civilians, but we served for the government overseas, and we lived in the Middle East. Our non-RAD daughter was born in the Middle East. And, you know, you
didn't get PTSD from that.
No, we worked counterterrorism for a decade. I mean, we know to some degree what PTSD looks like and how that comes about. The idea that could happen, like you said, from parenting just sounds ridiculous. At the same time, I couldn't deny all the symptoms that I had. I couldn't deny that we were totally freaked out in our own home. And I couldn't deny the fact that, I mean, we're being threatened and, you know, from children that they themselves had trauma. And again, I could recognize that. I could accept that they were traumatized, but the idea that now we are just was really, I went through quite a long streak of denial with that.
Well, and that's a huge part of grief, is the denial. Yep. And, you know, breaking through that is one of the first things to grief, but it kind of comes around again and again, because you're like, well, maybe in that area, but not over here. But
right.
But maybe if I just did this, or if I just did that, if we had only done, and all of that bargaining kind of stuff that we do is part of the grief process too.
Absolutely. I can fix them. If I just parent differently, I can heal them. And I truly believe that for many years. I mean, we had our daughters with RAD in our home for 10 years. And, you know, I not only believed that, but I also believed that our daughter that doesn't have RAD was part of that too, that was part of her responsibility too, was helping to heal and fix. And now I wouldn't have said it out loud, but I would say things like, you know, it's good for them to see how, you know, have a healthy sibling, and it'll help them, you know, she can have that good influence on them, not understanding that this disorder that is not, that our children with RAD can't even fix themselves just from, you know, right away, just doing these steps and they're healed. You know, I'm thinking though that the rest of us would be able to have that type of impact on them. And so that was very difficult when I, you know, I was living day in, day out, seeing the results that it's not happening.
And then your child has this burden placed on them.
Yes.
Unwittingly. I mean, we didn't know.
No. And right. And it wasn't something I went in thinking this will be her responsibility. It was more of this is great. We have a child in the home that it can help them.
Yeah, we know what healthy looks like.
Right.
So it will rub off, and they will start to learn how to be healthy.
Right. And
but in reality, it kind of is almost the opposite of that. Absolutely. Where the trauma rubs off and the healing does not necessarily rub off.
Yes. And
so now, so you end up with a child who does not struggle with RAD, who is traumatized herself.
Yes.
And so that's kind of where your thought for this came from.
Yes. So when our daughters with RAD, it reached the point, and again, I think of myself as a slow learner in this.
I don't know anybody who's a quick learner in this.
Okay. Well, for us, it took a decade to realize, okay, this really isn't, it's not working in the sense of, it's not that it's uncomfortable or difficult. It's we literally, we have death on our doorstep. Whether it would be
somebody may not make it.
Yes. Here. And right. And so,
can I jump back just real quick to the PTSD thing?
Sure.
When I was doing some training to become a crisis responder, they talked about the two sources of trauma that could create PTSD. And one was either this happening to you or somebody very close to you, or watching it is a threat of death that could happen. You see something very violent, you know that either you could die or somebody next to you could die. You either experience that yourself or you watch it happen to somebody else. And that's why we think of military. Right. But the other way that it can happen is the threat of your psychological life can be so messed with, where you think you might be going crazy. You might lose your sanity.
Right.
Or both.
Right. And you've experienced moments where people have confirmed for you that you have lost your sanity.
Correct.
Where you have that mirrored back to you, and by either, again, well-meaning friends and family, or even counselors. Who don't understand,
or schools, or teachers, schools,
or social services. There's a lot of, and again, it's a difficult situation, beyond difficult. It's a dangerous situation, whether there's physical violence involved or not. You're talking about abuse. You're talking about, and again, even, years back, I had a difficult time even in truly appreciating the significance of mental
severity,
abuse.
even.
Right.
That, and just to clarify again, we get that kids who have come out of traumatic backgrounds, that is the way they respond. It's a total self-preservation survival mode that they go into. They're not even conscious of it. They're not even aware of it. They're not doing this on purpose to hurt anybody. It is not malicious or deceitful or any of those kinds of things. We know that. And yet it continues and it continues. And over time, you start going, okay, when is there a responsibility that needs to be taken, and how do they learn that, and because we're not getting there in our home.
Right. It's not happening. And so for us, it became clear that, I'd like to think of, how things were escalating, but really they had already been at that level for many years. It was just, again, the difficulty I had in accepting it. And
you get so used to it that it feels normal. Because it is your normal, but you forget that it is so dysfunctional.
You really don't. And other people don't see it because, again, it manifests and presents in the home. So, and I wasn't completely honest with folks about what was going on. And that fear, you hide and you pretend, and as much as you can, and you think that's the only way to keep your sanity. It's not. It doesn't help you stay sane. But in the moment, that's what you're doing to survive.
Right.
And so all the while, as we're talking about all this too, I'm thinking these are all my experiences and thoughts and feelings. And I did not understand and even really allow myself to go there when it came to my daughter without Rad. I just, there was things with, my husband, there's things with me and, doing all of stuff. And I'm thinking of general safety for my daughter without Rad, but I really hadn't let myself go there as far as like, how is this actually impacting her? Is it really that bad?
Because she can just slink back and hide as well.
Yes.
And, many times siblings of kids with Rad just do what they have to do to survive as well. And so a lot of times it's not until the child with Rad is outside the home that we start seeing the damage that was done.
Yes. And it is, and it's quite, it can be quite jarring as a parent to see that, to realize that this whole time that I'm trying to, I recognize the pride in me saying this, but my hubris got in the way, but my whole time in trying to rescue and save my children with Rad, I literally allowed trauma in my own home, I allowed my other child to be traumatized under my care. That was very difficult to accept.
It's tough to swallow, isn't it?
Yes, it really is, because it's this, wait a second, no, we're the healthy family and stable family. We're the ones helping, our children with trauma. And the idea that under my care that this happened, I mean, it took a lot of counseling, talking with you. It took a lot of prayer to really be able for me to even accept that and to understand.
Yes, and it takes that acceptance to be able to move into healing.
Yes. And it's it sounds awful. It's this, we want to reject that notion, but it really does. It's once you acknowledge that, then it is that, okay, I can start actually helping help my child without, and I can hear her and see her in ways that I was not hearing and seeing before. And, I want to take a moment to say too, that through this, I think we were maybe a couple of months into the Rad Sibs ministry before it was pointed out to me. And this is how, again, my slowness and things, that I had a counselor ask me, are you a sibling of Rad? And my first response was no. And the answer to that is actually yes. What I haven't mentioned is our daughters with Rad are actually our biological nieces, and they are my sister's children and biological children. And my sister has been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. She's a few years older than me. She is, I love my sister. I care for my sister. It's a very difficult, just in the sense of there's not much of a relationship there. We are both okay with that. It's not, there's not a whole lot of, it's just, it is what it is. I've accepted that for many years, but what I hadn't acknowledged was that impact growing up on me. And I didn't know what Rad was until 3 or 4 years ago. So anyhow, here we are, starting this ministry. We had recognized that our daughter had been traumatized, that we all had been. We'd recognized that she wasn't able to really even acknowledge it herself for quite some time. She felt very alone, that nobody else could possibly understand, because no one in her school could. And especially, there's so much that goes into all of this that our families experience. Right. And so all that, it just was, it was a jarring moment for me, even after we had launched the site.
Right. It's like, oh, wait, it's me.
So yes. So it was just that, all these, and so you can see, basically the trajectory too of what can happen with these siblings. The non-RAD kids in the home continue to play that peacemaker role oftentimes, to the point where, as what I've done in my 20s, I felt like it was my responsibility to step in and to raise 3 of my sister's children, because
in your 20s,
what was that?
In your 20s, you said?
Well, late 20s. Yeah. Late 20s.
Okay. Whew.
So, well, and I actually, when I was in college, my sister has two other children that my parents and one of the biological fathers raised. But I was my first year of college. My first niece was born, and I had talked with my parents. I was looking for a way to raise her, to adopt her. As an 18-year-old, my parents, were able to guide me away from that at that time, and they took custody. But again, just the decades, I'm in my mid 40s now, and early 40s. I'm in my early 40s. I just
let's be accurate here.
Sorry. This is, again, my brain. I'm not sure.
Don't add many years.
I'm like, wait, am I in my mid 40s? Again, my brain's a little mush, from things, but
I'm in my mid to late 50s, but we'll just say mid. Yeah.
We got to get real specific, right?
That's right. The older you are, those years count more and more. I was just thinking, Monica, one thing I think we should do on another podcast is come back and talk about adult Rad siblings.
Yes.
Because what you're doing with Rad Sibs is much more geared towards what? You tell me.
Well, and that's what's fascinating. I would have said kids and teens, but we've actually, a lot of people that have reached out to us are young adult men. And who are, either right out of the home. It's been interesting to see, but yes, my initial thought was, this is for basically kids my child's age. My daughter's 13, but she was 11 when this was started. So it was around that age that I was really thinking for the parents.
Preteens and teens.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, I think that would be a great idea to circle back another time for that, because it is something that needs to be talked about. The younger kids and the teens, the parents, it is something that needs to be advocated for, because that will stay with them. And if left untreated, if left not acknowledged, can cause cycles and continue for siblings to seek out unhealthy relationships.
Yes.
Or continue to try to support those siblings with RAD throughout the years in unhealthy ways, where there's more either enabling or there's just unhealthy ways of coping.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Rad Sibs.
Sure. So Rad Sibs is basically a community that we have. It's a virtual community of sorts. We have people from all over North America. We have people overseas as well, both siblings and parents. But I think we're up to about 400 or so siblings. Yes, it's really neat to see, again, of all ages. And we don't provide a lot of hands-on things, but what we do provide is, again, just that awareness of, you are not alone. Here we have interviews of some teen Rad Sibs, some younger Sibs. We offer Sib shops that you and your coaches then facilitate, and those are virtual.
Yeah, again, can I share about that just a little bit?
Absolutely, go for it.
Yeah, so I think we've done this for about a year. Is that right? So. Or maybe a little longer. And what we've done, and it's been a process. We're still kind of trying to firm up how this works the best, but we ask parents to register for the kid, and we just ask different questions, like how old are they, developmentally, how old do they seem? Because a lot of kids, when they've been traumatized, they might be 14, but they might fit in better with a group around 11 or 12 than they would with 14 to 16 or something like that. So we really try to put the groups together developmentally based on where the child is. And we try to put them also in groups of whether their sibling is still in the home or whether their sibling is not in the home anymore, because we discovered this out, that sometimes those two can trigger each other.
Yes.
Because if your sibling is out of the home and you have somebody in the group whose sibling is still in the home and they're still going through it, it brings all that right back to you, and it's difficult. And if your sibling is still in the home, and you're listening to kids whose sibling is removed from the home, they're dealing with grief on a different level. So
Absolutely.
it's really challenging. So it's been hard because, you know, we really want groups to be about 6 or 8 people, but finding a group of 6 to 8 that's all the same age in the same category, kind of, it's hard to do.
It is.
So the larger Rad Sibs get, the better we'll be at being able to provide that. But we go through, it's usually a 6-week process, and the parents join on the first session with the coaches so that they can understand what we're doing. Because we definitely, you know, in families with kids with RAD, there's so much triangulation. There's so much where the therapist says this and then the parents are out of the loop or whatever. We don't want to be any part of that. We want parents to understand, but we also want the kids to feel safe to be able to speak, because they may have been hurt by things mom or dad are doing or have done or said. And so we work with the parents at the beginning to really reassure them that we are you. We're the same team. We've been in your situation. Our kids have said the same thing your kids are saying. We understand. We've heard our kids. And so we want to help the parents understand we're here to really help, and we're trying to build some good tools in your kids to be able to come back to you and talk to you about this. So if they do, we need you to know we get it, that it kind of stings, it hurts, but also if you shut them down, it's going to make it so much harder. So let's coach you through how to do this so that when your kids come to you and say, okay, I want to have a conversation, and they've got a tool in their hand and they're trying to use it, that it's successful, because then you can really bridge some of the gaps that have been there, and you can really heal up some of the trauma that's happened and get you and your children back on the same page to healing.
And I want to say that there is, you know, we spent a lot of our time, I know I did, I spent a lot of my time, again, focusing on what I thought was what was broken, right? Where my kids with RAD. And there's nothing wrong with that. But just even acknowledging, okay, if I'm doing that, if my attention is directed over here, then, and I only have so much time in the day, right? And resources, right. That just even acknowledging that, okay, I'm not really pouring into this. I'm not this other relationship over here with my other child. I'm spent with all of this. And that's where a lot of us live most of the time. Yeah. But I want to just let parents know, I understand that I do that. So this is difficult probably to hear that, okay, your other child needs you as well, and needs that one-on-one attention, and is also being hurt. And that's a hard one too. It's also, that child's also being hurt. And
maybe hurt in a different way. So you may not even understand.
Yes. And hurt in a different way, you know, the realities too. A lot of the siblings experience abuse at the hands of the kids with RAD that the parents don't know about. Sometimes us as moms especially might have a little suspicion, but we don't want to entertain that thought. We don't, again, want to go there.
Well, because what do you do if you find that out? I mean, the ramifications are huge.
Yes.
And so just like we have a hard time in our own denial of, you know, what was really going on, we have it there too.
We do. And we have to keep in mind that our kids without RAD, again, are trying to process all that, the same stuff we're trying to process, but with a child's brain or teen's brain, as opposed to an adult, full grown brain. And this is their childhood that they are, you know, we may have ours to go back to. And again, I, you know, shared just a little bit about my own. So again, I also kind of had that extra expectation that, well, you know, this is similar. Unfortunately, you know, I saw my sister do these things and behave in this way and what have you. And
so it felt normal to you
in a way. Well. You know, I'm thinking, okay, well, then my daughter can handle this and she'll be okay. I turned out okay, she'll be okay. And we justify things. And because again, it seems like it's impossible to acknowledge what's going on. But the thing to remember is that for our kids without RAD, there is a different kind of hope. And not to say that there's not hope with RAD, there is hope with RAD. But there's a different kind of hope with our kids without RAD, that healing can come quicker. Healing can be more, you know, whole, that relationship, like don't just let go of that relationship, or don't feel like since your child is saying they're fine and you want to believe that
and that you had a good attachment to begin with.
That
they'll be able to withstand all of this.
Right. It's acknowledge that, okay, that this is, of course, this is hurting them. There's likely things going on that I can't see everything all at once. There's likely things that I don't want to know about or don't want to hear about that I need to.
Right. And one thing I've heard from many Rad Sibs is they could see the damage this was doing to mom in particular, but mom and dad, and they don't want to be another contributor to pain.
Yes.
So they think they're just supposed to pull themselves together, hold it all together, not bring their problems. They don't want to be a burden.
Yep. That's to a T. That's now some might at moments have moments where they bring something to the parents. And what we unknowingly do as a parent is just kind of shut it down because we just can't deal with yet another thing. And that makes our child retreat that much more into this. I'm fine. My problems aren't as bad as my siblings. I can deal with it. I can basically parent myself in a way. I can take care of myself.
And also potentially take care of mom.
Yes.
Take care of other things so they grow up too fast.
Yes.
Yeah, they don't have some of the things that children need developmentally to become adults. They start having to act as an adult too early.
Yes. One area that I've noticed with when parents reach out, so usually it's moms, but sometimes it's dads. When parents reach out to us and they're at that point where they're like, okay, I have to acknowledge that this is doing something to my child. But what's interesting, and this is where I began to, when I first thought of my daughter without RAD, this is how I thought of it. And it may sound terrible, but this is where a lot of, again, parents coming to us say the same thing. We'll say, how do I get my child without RAD to basically not poke the bear or not respond, not react to all the drama, all the stuff that my RAD child's doing? When my RAD child is yelling at them or
stealing their stuff
or doing whatever, how do I get stealing their stuff? How do I get my kid without RAD? How do I get my other child to just let it go, to just like not make it worse? And that's where a lot of us as moms, again, because our focus is I'm trying to just survive.
Can we all just be okay? Can you just leave it alone? Yeah.
Yes, that squeaky wheel. And we communicate that to our child, whether we realize it or not. Sometimes we do it directly.
Can be just a look.
Purposefully.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Other times we do it more subtly. And again, that's usually the starting point for where we're at least even acknowledging our child without RAD. And I want to encourage parents, if that's kind of where you're at, that's normal. That's where a lot of us are. But I want to encourage you to just, to breathe and just to be mindful that your child, that what you want to teach your child, is the goal really to teach your non-RAD to take a punch or to be okay when people steal from them or yell at them, call them
or
names,
lie
about them? Is that really, because what happens with that message is, again, that basically encourages them to accept abuse
and to be a victim.
And so that child will get that message, and whether they accept it and they become more of that wallflower until they're a little bit older, and then they just want to be out of the house, so they're not having to witness it all or be a part of that. Whatever may happen, there tends to be, again, they're more drawn then to those types of relationships where they accept when people lie to them, they do all of that. They don't know how to cope and really truly deal with it, because what they were always taught was just shove it down.
Something was going through my mind as you were saying that. As we did these groups, one thing that the coaches were telling me, we really recognized that kids maybe 8 to about 11 or 12, we were really working at that age on prevention of them becoming more traumatized, teaching them how to stay safe, teaching them communication skills, teaching them that their voice matters, that their body is their own, teaching them boundaries, teaching them, all of these kinds of things. What we noticed from about maybe 11 or 12 up to like 16 or so was it was more on maintaining and learning how to speak up and kind of trying to help them make it. And then the ones like 17 or above, it was more on recovery. And that's just interesting, you know, because if we can teach them that early on, and that's never part of adoption or foster training, is how to deal with the trauma that may impact your other children. You know, all we're told is that, well, RAD is a very rare disorder. And, you know, I happen to deal with hundreds of families who have RAD. So
right?
I don't know that it's that rare, but there's a lot of siblings involved. And a lot of times, you know, the parents, their first round that they go through seeking treatment is for the child with RAD.
Right.
Next, it might be for themselves or for their marriage that's falling apart. And then there's something for the other kids.
Yes, it really is a forgotten part of the family, and that's how these kids feel. That's where, and again, the cycle continues because we as parents, we want them to be okay, and they, you know, often kids with siblings with RAD will say, you know, I'm fine, you know, and so we don't dig. Right. And we don't want to question that because, gosh, what would we do?
We just need relief.
Right. And that's okay to a point. You know, that's one of the reasons why on our website too, and in some of the videos, some of the siblings will share ways that, you know, things that help them cope. Making sure that they have somebody, you know, sometimes this is hard too. As a mom, we want it to be us, but if you still have your RAD kids in the home and you're still in the thick of it, be realistic about that. Right. And we need to be, because how in the world can we, you know, how can we have one-on-one time with our child without RAD, without being interrupted? Those are really tricky things to do. So trying to even outsource some of that. And again, it sounds terrible, but we're talking about really drastic situations that we're living in. So sometimes it does.
Well, it reminds me a lot, you know, if a child has a parent who dies, then it's really important that the remaining parent finds some people that are of that opposite gender that will help their kid, you know, come along and teach your son how to be a man and you know, all of those kinds of things. We have to do that. Sometimes that's a drastic situation and it's sad and you don't want to have to do that, but we recognize we have to. And again, it's for the health of that child, you know, so putting aside our needs of, you know, I'm feeling inadequate or insecure about this, or even jealous maybe. I mean, I had some of that I really had to deal with, and I can either just, you know, hope for the best, or I can arrange for and say, hey, yep, like, you know, maybe she could spend a week at a friend's where I know that the family is safe, you know, all those things, of course. Or, you know, maybe there's these different opportunities, or a youth group leader, or, you know, or finding even a coach or a counselor for them to talk to. Exactly. And so having, you know, seeking out resources outside of your home doesn't have to be a bad thing. And really, if it's coming from you, as opposed to just them as they get older, not wanting to be home because it's just too painful and too scary and all those things. If it's coming from you, that can strengthen your relationship with your child. Because again, if your child sees mom, you're trying. Mom understands, like, this and she is really seeking out help, and she's finding people that really get what I'm going through. They can feel eventually your love exactly. And eventually and as they get older too, that's easier for them to accept and see than if we don't, and they just were living in this and they feel like mom just never got it, never understood, you know, that. And so it's tough. Could you share some of the other resources? I know you have a couple of books, and what else do you have? Yes. So we have, and actually there's a couple of books written by Addie Davis, and that's her pen name. She's actually done some interviews now, and her parents, I think, have their own podcast dealing with fantastic mental health. Yes, it's really neat. And so she wrote a book. And so all of these resources are available on our website, radsibs.org. We have a handful of videos, again, from interviews that you, Carrie, have done. And we get to hear from sibs of different ages. That has been really impactful from what we've seen. The emails we get from siblings,
talk about that. They either stumbled across the video, which I'm not sure exactly how that happened, other than maybe they were searching on Rad. Again, maybe looking for answers for their parents to help their parents. But just them seeing like, oh my gosh, there's somebody else on the planet that lives with the craziness in their home like this, you know?
Right.
And that brings some level of comfort. It doesn't, you know, in and of itself is not going to provide full healing, but it definitely gets them a step further in being able to recognize and process their own emotions and feelings. We have a Sibs spot, which is on our website for, again, we talk about ways to cope for kids to be able to go on. For younger kids, they can go and play some games and watch some other videos and have some form of entertainment that's safe. There's music, there's songs and stuff that are available on there that are encouraging and just, it's a safe website environment there where the kids, I mean, if their siblings are having, you know, are raging or doing something, you know, not that I necessarily would encourage devices in their bedrooms or anything, but I mean, but it is, again, drastic situations. I mean, it's something that they can go to and it can be
zone out and really tune into this thing for a minute and help them breathe and get through it.
Exactly.
Oh, that's so good.
That's not going to compound the problem.
Right. You're not going to, it's not pornography and it's, which, you know, a lot of the Rad kids struggle with. And so we're already dealing with that on devices, but it's actually something that is helping them spiritually and with their mental health and, and all of that.
Absolutely. So it's, you know, we do, one of the things that we like to do and is kind of old school is the snail mail. We've gotten some good feedback on that, which is kind of neat because we weren't too sure, you know, if it's just too old school.
Well, most kids these days have never gotten anything in the mail, you know.
That's true. Other than like, you know, Amazon stuff. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, so we send out cards and welcome cards, encouragement and different things and like bookmarks, and
I've got a couple of them right here, actually. Some
exactly.
different tools.
So things, you know, and personal notes, just letting them know that there is somebody out there who's thinking about them and that their parents love them too. Again, we want to affirm the parents in all of this. We are not,
because we are these parents.
Yes.
I have been. My kids are almost 30 now, but I am a Rad mom and a non-Rad mom, and I understand that. And you know, even when the trauma is for the most part resolved, at least in the home, there's still a season that could be a couple years up to a decade or so of healing that needs to take place with the non-Rad children.
And there's so much hope in that. Again, I think sometimes, I know I personally, you know, there was a point for sure when I was feeling hopelessness towards my kids with Rad. You know, there were seasons where it was, they're never going to heal. And to be honest, our Rad kids have not experienced complete healing. So I want to make sure that, you know, I don't want to make it sound like we reached this.
We're all good now.
Right. We haven't, you know, there's still all these struggles. At the same time, we've seen a lot of healing with our non-Rad. And that's been incredible to watch. Again, we didn't really understand how deep those wounds were until the dust settled. And then it's this,
and it all blew up.
Exactly. It's this, well, there's a lot, you know, that needs to, but there's so much hope with our non-Rad kids, because like you said, I mean, they did start with that attachment. It is a different ballgame.
And I think also what I've seen, at least in my daughter, I've seen this really amazingly, is that because of what they went through as children, and when they have the healing, they have a capacity to understand some things at a deeper level than maybe some kids who have never gone through a traumatic thing. They have a great deal of empathy and compassion and have a language around some of these things that some of the other kids don't have.
And that's what we, as moms, that's what we went into all of this hoping for, right? We were hoping that an outcome could be a secondary outcome after, of course, the healing of our other kids would be that our child without trauma would become more compassionate and empathetic by having grown up. And that,
but it doesn't just happen by osmosis.
No, it does not. And that it does not. And again, that can still be an eventual outcome, but it does take a lot of difficult work. It takes a lot of acknowledging that there is trauma there. And that, again, is not pleasant at all, but you can still have that end result. We have, you mentioned your daughter. There's a young man in one of the videos, his name is Johnny. And him and a couple of his brothers, he has two brothers that also do not have RAD. And the three of them, I mean, their relationship and what's, again, through all the healing after, his parents really acknowledging what happened to them and working through that with them. I mean, it's incredible, the lives that they're living now. And it's amazing. So it's definitely, there's so much hope there. And, and we can advocate and fight for all of our kids, not just the kids with RAD, getting them resources. It's acknowledge that glass child in our home, the one that we kind of see through, really look at them and get beyond the whole I'm fine facade to really see, okay, if me as the mom, if I'm seeing this stuff and I'm not okay, who would be? I mean, a healthy person is not okay in this environment, and these things happen. So, in my child over here who says they're okay, or maybe, at one point says I'm having an issue here, they really see them, really, really hear them. That a lot of healing can come from that.
That's so good. Well, Monica, I just want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing about this today. In the bottom in the description, we'll also put radsibs.org. Yeah. I really encourage people to check it out. I know so many people who have gone through there and have found hope and started on a journey or continued their journey of healing by watching these videos or joining one of the groups, or, going to what's the other place where they can go to find the music and the...
So it's on radsibs.org. It's called SibSpot.
SibSpot.
They can, and again, for some of the younger kids, there's some coding, gaming. So there's stuff that doesn't necessarily have to do at all with RAD. It's just a reprieve. Some animated stuff, again, just for, again.
And parents, feel free to check it out. Yeah. Yes, so you know what your kids are looking at. Yeah. And then if you're interested in your child joining one of the groups, we don't have a date set for our next one yet, but if we know that there's a lot of interest, we'll get those going. So you can either reach out at radsibs.org and you can find that under Sib Shops, or you can look at carrieotoole.com and look in our store for the Sib Shops as well. So we both offer those, and it's the same thing. So you can just find them in two different locations, because we're pushing the same the same agenda here, that we want healing for these kids that are non-RAD.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I think we should do this again and talk about adults
That'd be great.
that are Rad Sibs. Yeah, there's a whole other topic there. Anyway, thank you so much. And we'll see you again back here on Broken and Brilliant.
Carrie.
You bet.
Thank you. Bye-bye.